All right, I think it's 1:30. We can go ahead and begin. I do believe I have a quorum. Isn't that right, Christy? Okay, and we have one person on Zoom, and that'd be Senator Simmons. Can you hear us? Maybe, maybe not. Well, we're here. All right, okay, so we'll go ahead and begin. Looking at the agenda, I want to start near the bottom and call up Senate Bill 2678 and recognize Senator Delano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this is a committee sub or proposed committee sub that we're looking at, which you should have as a separate addendum to your packet. And this bill is very similar to the bill that we discussed last session that ended up getting caught up by COVID. It addresses two things. It addresses academic standards and then teacher training. The academic standards will be based off of MDE's 2018 College and Career Readiness Standards. It'll be a phased-in approach for computer science classes through middle schools and high schools across the state. The phase-in starts in 2022 and it will be fully implemented in 2025. This is something we've worked with the department on over the last year and a half, and I think it's a really great way to leverage the technology and the devices that the school districts have received due to the COVID response. So it is just a great way for us to leverage that investment to do it. The next part of it is the teacher training component. MDE will work through the accreditations that are required and the endorsements that are required to help with students or help with getting teachers to be able to teach all across our state. This is something that we're subject to on appropriations. We're going to be able to offer scholarships to teachers across the state, and we're going to put an emphasis in the areas that are void of computer science classes right now. The goal here is to make sure that all school districts and schools across the state have the teachers necessary to be able to teach the courses that we discussed in the first part of it. I think what's important for us to know, Mr. Chairman, is that this has been labeled, and we're going to name this bill the Mississippi Computer Science and Cyber Education Equality Act. And what this is going to achieve is it will achieve a computer science standard for every single school district across the state, and not just the ones that are in the areas where they're fortunate enough to have extra resources for that. So this will provide it for the entire state. That's a brief explanation, Mr. Chairman. If you have any questions or members of the committee do, I'll yield.
All right, thank you, Senator Delano. Any questions for Senator Delano?
Motion.
Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It says committee sub on the, or CCS on the bottom of my, there's the committee sub. Thank you. I was looking for the bill and it wasn't sure. And the only other question I have for Senator Delano, you mentioned I was trying to go through it, the potential for appropriations on this. Can you explain that again? Something about the scholarships?
Yes, so we did a fiscal note on this project, and it would require about $2 million to fully implement it. What we're fortunate enough is that we've had great community partners step up to help with some of those costs. C-Spire, great corporate citizen for Mississippi, or from Mississippi, has committed it up or at least $1 million towards these scholarships. And I know that I've personally had conversations with other businesses and groups across the country who are interested in participating in programs like this, where they can go into individual schools and or districts and be able to sponsor teachers to get their endorsements and or their accreditation that's necessary. Other than that, we don't exactly know what that cost is going to be for the general fund at this moment, or for the education budget at this moment, but it is something that we're working on, and we look forward to working with you in your office.
Thank you.
Would every student be required to take this? It'd be a mandatory class and not an elective?
Negative. It is not a mandated class. It would only be an elective, just like any of the other electives that you would have like in science. You're only required to have, or,
Okay, thank you.
there you go.
Senator Bryan?
It's twice today I've been able to turn on the microphone. There's always hope. This may be a minor issue, but it seems to me that we're being very specific about what we do, and we're also directing the state board to do something. And my suggestion is we would accomplish, as a practical matter, we would accomplish everything we're hoping to accomplish with this bill if instead of saying we are authorizing and directing the State Department to do something, if we just authorize them to do it, and if we had some weasel word along the lines of substantially similar to, under the theory that once you get to the implementation of something, there may be minor tweaks and all. And my thought is, a practical matter, if we pass this legislation with that language in it, that the State Board of Education will understand the interest that the legislature has in this and get about doing it. And I'm not opposing the bill or anything, but I'm just suggesting those two provisions might be something to think about. So I guess if I'm asking a question, am I asking a question or pontificating? If I'm asking a question, I guess I wind up by saying, will you agree to think about that?
I do understand the comment, and I will work with the department as this bill moves forward to make sure that we take that into consideration as further.
Well, you've been working, Senator Delano, with the department to this point, correct? And
Yes.
and
Yes,
delaying-
and including the board. I've spoken to several of the board members about this bill as well.
Any further questions for Senator Delano? Senator Delano, you have a motion?
My motion would be title sufficient due pass committee sub.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 2678 passes. Next up, I'd like to call up Senate Bill 2664 and recognize Senator Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it would be, asked if it'd be okay to take up 2665 as well.
I have no problem with that. Does the committee have any objection to that as
I
well?
can, sorry.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins.
Both of these bills, just real quickly, you've heard me explain the early learning collaboratives, how successful we are, where we are. And these bills were filed last year. We passed them, a version last year. 2664 is the bill that puts into statute the newest benchmarks. If you recall, we had a presentation last year on the collaboratives, and the National Institute of Early Education, everybody that's reviewed it, what's given us our top rankings are that we have these benchmarks in our statute. The NEAR did 2 additional benchmarks, gave a grace period, and so what this bill does is put the benchmarks into statute, which will allow us to maintain our top 5 rating and continue to do that. Also, it cleans up some of the language. There were a couple peer reports that came out, and if you require, the original legislation required peer to do reports and report back to us, and the legislation cleans up the language, particularly on evidence-based curriculum, what that is and how that works. There was a little bit of back and forth between peer and MDE. That's why we had those done. And in lines starting at 56 to 66, that redefines those things. And also lines 151 through 159. Then on 2665, the first part of the bill is the current law, is the same thing. And what that is simply doing in the latter part of the bill is to actually codify what we did in appropriations last year. When the original program came about, there was a number that was used to determine what it costs to educate on the pre-K level. And that actually, when we did it, just because of the money that we had, and we wanted to see how successful the program was, we set it at the certain level. This 2665 raises that level and matches it with what we did in the appropriation last year, which allows us to bring on more collaboratives, but also to meet the obligations that we had, and those obligations are allowing teachers to be hired, training, curriculum, and things like that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be open to any questions.
Senator Hill?
What is the increase year over year? Is that the amount of increase for this year compared to last year? Because you were saying there was more money in it?
Yeah, so in the appropriation last year, I think it was 1.2 million thereabouts. And understand, there's no automatic increase. It's just what we do in appropriation, and it's funded outside of any formula. And so it's what we can quote afford. But what we've seen is the return on investment has been great. And so the legislature has decided to do that. So that's what we did last year. So it's about 1.2 million.
Just to follow up, 1.2 million more this year than last year?
No, last year over the previous year.
So last year was 1.2 million over the previous year?
Correct.
So what is the funding in this current year?
Okay. We haven't done the budget yet. The previous years, it has been, I think we were at 6 million. So our total is about 7.2 million, but it stayed at 3 million for a number of years. Then as the funding got better and all that kind of stuff, it went up to around the 6 million mark. But the budget is still to be set this year. I mean, we're still working on where the numbers are coming in. Well, right, and that's just that sets the floor in terms of how what the funding formula should be, but the language says subject to state appropriations. So if the appropriations are, if we have a pandemic or something, then it's not obligating us to do it, and it's subject to the appropriations process. And that is why this bill's double referred to appropriations, to allow our esteemed chairman to take his red pen and go through it.
Thank you, Senator Hill. Any further questions? Senator Blunt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Appreciate all of your work on early childhood, and anything that advances early childhood education in Mississippi, I'm for it. I just despise jargon and
Despise what?
jargon.
Oh,
And so my concern is, and I'm for your bill, but here's one thing that I just would caution you and all of us to address when we're writing legislation. I mean, I'm looking at lines 60 through 66. Moderate evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented quasi-experimental study with promising evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented correlational study with statistical controls for selection bias.
so let me.
And so
Right.
here's my concern. If we want these programs to be expanded, we want them to be effective, but we just don't want to put a whole bunch of words in the code that nobody really knows what they mean. And let's just trust the department and our school districts to do this right without putting in all, I mean, I don't know what any of that means. Nobody.
Well, let me.
And somebody, some national nonprofit wrote it so we get a good grade on a report card or whatever. Again, this is a good bill and we need more of this, but my concern with any legislation that we deal with is an ordinary person needs to be able to read it and understand it, and we don't need to get too specific with professional language in statute. So that's the only thing I would say.
Yeah, no, normally I 100% agree with you. And I see Pete from the MDE over there. He can tell you as a result of the peer report that came out.
Okay.
There was a back and forth between peer and MDE about what evidence-based curriculum is. And in the original one of the benchmarks that is required is an evidence-based curriculum. Mm-hmm. Well, as I have come to learn, within the world of education, evidence-based can be seen in a certain couple different ways. Okay, so there was a back and forth how that was doing. This language was written as a result of the peer report and what the conversations that happened between MDE, and to get us to a place that we met the benchmarks and it could be satisfied. So yes, I don't disagree with you about how that looks. And it's, if you notice, it's a stair step, to be quite honest. It's, if you have like that line 60, strong evidence from one well-designed and well-implemented study, or moderate evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented. Look, what's the, there's a person over at Peer or something that specializes in this kind of stuff. I can't even remember, a psychometrician or something like that, right? Is that right, Pete? He's nodding yes. Okay, so this is psychometrician language.
Well, it's not English.
I don't
you know,
disagree with that.
So anyway, what's a good bill? Let's just expand it. Let's get good people and give them what they need to do their jobs and
But I think to your answer is, this will help MDE, who has authority over overseeing this program, and this corrects or certainly improves the law based on evidence-based curriculum.
thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Title
Wiggins, do you have a motion?
sufficient do pass in block 2664 and 2665.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Those two bills shall be reported. Let's take up Senate Bill 2527, the one at the very top, the Mississippi Critical Teacher Shortage Act. We're extending the repealers on that. You have a committee sub as well. It's not in the packet, I don't believe. It might be separate. We took this up last year, and we did a one-year repealer on it so we could study it. We got some more information and brought it back this year as well. We have a 3-year repealer on this one. It goes to July 1 of 2024. In going through it, you can look at Section 2. It allows for reimbursement of moving expenses up to $1,000 for teachers. Section 3 allows for reimbursement of interviewing expenses. Section 4 is the University Assisted Teacher Recruitment and Retention Grant Program that allows for scholarships for attainment of master's degree in education or education specialist degrees. Section 5 is the housing loan program. That is for $6,000, and that loan program would convert to a grant program so long as the teacher stays for 3 years. It's reimbursable or granted to them for $2,000 for every year that they fulfill the program. Section 6 is basically just says that creates a fund to pay for the program. I'll tell you the committee sub differs from the original bill that has been filed in that it removes a pilot program, the West Tallahatchie County Housing Development. It was a program that was a pilot program established, I guess, when the bill was passed in 1998. It's never been funded, never been utilized, and so we just removed it in the committee sub. Now, if there's anybody that feels like we need to leave that back in there, we can take up the original bill. I'll just leave that to the committee, but like I said, it's my understanding since '98 it's never been utilized, never been funded, and so I've removed it in the committee sub. So, and Senator Hill, you have any questions?
Like Cobb, I can't get this thing to work. Do we have any information on any defaults or, like numbers on how many have taken advantage of this and have completed the requirements? Or how many have we had to try to claw back the money from? Is there any data on that?
I met with certain individuals, and they have told me that the default rate is about 7%, and that's really low compared to what they thought it was and what we thought it was last year, to be honest with you. So
Yeah, I
7%.
remembered something about
Oh, I
that
think
last
it's
year.
better
That's-
than what I thought it was.
So only 7%?
About 7%.
Thank
That's what
you.
I was told. Senator Jordan?
That is my district, and that, the fact that it's a rural area where you need resources for build housing units in that area.
Right.
That's something we needed a long time ago, but I'm glad it's coming, even though it's a little late, but it certainly will help those people in that area. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Jordan. Senator Hobson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it relates to Section 5, does this overlap with the bill that we've got pending now on the teacher loan repayment plan?
No, this Section 5 and this 2577 deals with housing, not student loan repayment.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have is with respect to the language on the critical teacher shortage, what do we need to do to take a look at that? I think you and I have spoken about it briefly, but what can be done to take a look at the areas that are currently listed as critical teacher shortages?
Yeah, correct, sir. We have talked about it at length, and I've talked to several senators about that and redefining what is a critical teacher shortage area. Because it could be, I think, as you said, Vicksburg, Warren, or it could be Richton, Mississippi, which is in Perry County, and Hattiesburg is another one, for example, that's on that list. So I think it's something we are looking at. I don't know that we have a vehicle available this year to do it, but I know that we've discussed it, and we'll probably do something next year about it.
Is it that the department sets that critical teacher shortage?
They do, that I'm aware of, yes. Isn't that right, Pete? That's correct?
And a final question is, on that point, can we, if we have this or the other bill alive as we go through the session, would you be amenable to looking at the critical teacher shortage areas if we need to? I don't really want to legislate that because I know how that can change from time to time, but I don't want to see, I go back to the same discussion we had in I think it was public health about the rural physicians. We're sending rural physicians to places. I don't think we intended, when the legislation was created, I don't think that was intended to happen and for them to go there.
I understand. Pete, if I could ask you, how does the department determine what is a critical needs area? I think we've discussed this before, but if you could, for the benefit of the committee, could you elaborate on that?
Just remembering from memory, the two biggest things is one of them being long-term subs. So if schools can't find qualified teachers, they tend to have substitutes that are in there for a long period of time. So that constitutes one issue, and the other issue is you may have some certified teachers, they might not be teaching in their field, so they're kind of teaching out of field, teaching in another subject because they're needed in another subject. Those are the two biggest ones that come to mind. I know there are some other factors, but I can't remember offhand. But definitely the long-term subs is a huge factor.
And is there a way that maybe the department could relook at
Yes.
what is a critical needs area and redefine that or come up with a better definition?
Absolutely, and I was just talking with my colleague Leah. We'll be open to some ideas, taking a fresh look at it, and be happy to share with you what we come up with.
Okay, thank you, Pete. I think Senator Hill, I think you had some, I'm sorry, Senator Hobson, were you done? Okay. All right, thank you. Any other further questions? Okay, do I hear a motion? Okay, you heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Thank you. That bill will be reported. We're going to skip down to nominations. Everything else we're going to pass on that right now. I think you have the packets of the 4 nominations, Senate nominations 6, 7, 20, and 21. If I could, before I forget, make sure you leave those packets here for Christy. She has to collect them and for privacy information and destroy those. So I've looked through these myself. I didn't find any issues. If there's no objection, I'd like to hear a motion to take them up in block. Okay. All right. We have an objection from Senator Bryan. So we'll start with Senate Nomination 6, Kimberly K. Remack to the Mississippi Charter School Authorizer Board.
Mr. Chairman,
Hey, Senator Bryan.
I just wanted to deal with Senate nomination number 21 differently. Other than that, I have no objection.
Do you want to hold that one aside?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the motion would be take up Senate Nomination 6, 7, and 20 in block. Is there any objection to that? Okay, we will do that. Okay. Any discussion on those nominations? Do I hear a motion? Okay, you heard that the motion is we advise and consent on Senate Nominations 6, 7, and 20. All in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Let's go to Senate Nomination 21 for Angela Sade Wheeler Bass to the State Board of Education. This is a governor's appointment, and it's a new appointment. Senator Bryan, I think you probably want to be recognized. You were recognized at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in somewhat of a dilemma in that I believe we should give great deference to nominations that come to us, whether from the governor or wherever else, and I'm inclined to do that. I do, however, notice that this nominee formerly was Deputy Director of Policy with the organization which insists on calling itself Mississippi First. I think most people have heard me hold forth on this proposition at length. I won't go into all that, it's simply to say that as someone who would not be in this body without the assistance I got from Mississippi First in 1983, I'm greatly disturbed to find this new organization using that term. And so, having said that and explained my proposition, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to vote present, and I'll just hush.
All right, thank you, Senator Bryan. There was an issue, if you look on the second page, it talks about appointees' compliance and statutory qualifications. Dr. Bass basically was a director for an ELC. It's my understanding that ethics has looked into this situation and has cleared or basically determined that she has no functions regarding the state appropriations. And so it's my understanding that ethics has cleared her for this position. But I definitely wanted to make that clear to the committee. If there are any questions or concerns about that, we can set this aside, or we can continue to take it up today and bring Dr. Bass before the committee. That is your prerogative, and I will do as the committee wishes. So, is there any comments or questions or anything on Dr. Bass's nomination? Okay. Do I hear any motions? Okay. Senator Wiggins moved that we advise and consent on Dr. Bass. All in favor say aye. No? Nays? Okay. The ayes have it. We have one present with Senator Bryan. Okay. Senator McMahon votes present. The ayes have it, and the nomination does pass, and it will be reported. I think that's all we have on the agenda. I don't anticipate having any other meetings regarding Senate bills, so we are done, and I ask for a motion for rise and report. All right, so moved. Thank you.